All right, we're back. Another special edition GolfWRX Radio. I've got Mike and Drew from Second Swing back on again. They didn't cancel us yet, so we're back for episode 2 of the 2023 GolfWRX Members Choice presented by Second Swing. And guys, we hung out, we talked some drivers, and now we're getting into irons. So I know I'm excited. Drivers went really well. There was some interesting clubs on the list, some stuff that we thought didn't make it that should have, and now we're jumping into irons, and I think we're going to probably get a little bit more of the same. There's probably some stuff that maybe either went a little higher or lower than we thought, and also maybe didn't make it, which will be interesting to talk about. So, yeah, irons, me personally, I think irons this year, I know everybody talks about drivers. That's like the big one every year, but I think this year's iron crop is insanely good. Like, there are just great irons from every manufacturer this year for any type of player. It's just been, I think, a really good iron year that people aren't talking as much about yet. But I think when we look back, 2023 could be a really great iron year. What do you guys think about that?
Yes. Even the last couple weeks, we're learning a lot about some new irons that are kind of on the horizon. And, today, as we're recording this, we're learning about P790s today.
Yep.
Title T series. There's, and I totally agree with you. Even some of the game improvement models, which we're really not going to talk about today, with the way the rankings fell and the voting, but a lot of great performance in the game improvement models, I thought, this year in some of the testing that we did. So you always love to see the steps forward that are taken, and I thought there was a lot of them this year with Geiger.
Yeah, a lot of steps forward, a lot of nice variety in the brands, some new faces versus the drivers, obviously some familiar ones as well. What I was pretty convinced would be number 1 ended up being number 5. There were some irons that we had earlier this year that I was impressed with and ended up getting recognition from the GolfWRX community. So really excited to break down this list.
Yeah, me too. It's a lot of fun. So let's jump right into it. We're getting like before. We're going to start with number 5, and as you mentioned, Mike, number 5 you thought might be number 1. I kind of thought it would be much higher on the list as well. I thought this would be a top 2, top 3 iron, but it is the Titleist T100, and an iron I played a lot last year. I really enjoyed it. I think it's shown on tour that it is probably one of the most, if not the most popular iron played on tour, but extremely soft and great player's cavity. But what do you guys love about the Titleist T100?
I think if you were to poll, the PGA Tour pros, you'd probably get this at number 1, which was where you probably thought.
Yep.
But I think I really like the way that Titleist has refined the look of this iron over the years. I think they've really kind of almost mastered that. It's almost, at address, this T100 really looks like a blade. There's obviously that performance in there, that stability that's necessary for, a little bit of forgiveness. And so I think, going from in the past, you had the AP2s, and now they've refined that sort of player's shallow cavity iron into this T100, what it is now in, the 2021 model, and then as we're learning about the 2023 here too. I think it's so clean, so refined, and then there's also, even with that, there's a little bit more stability that just makes it a much more playable iron for anybody really in that single-digit handicap range, or obviously lower than that.
Yeah, you talk about the look. I think the feel is also a huge jump over the AP2, and I think even Titleist would admit that a couple of the previous generations were slight misfires, and even over the T100S, I think it's a pretty significant step above. And it's Titleist, so it's always going to look beautiful.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the feel. I thought, because I played the 2019 T100 for a little bit, which was kind of more of a AP2 design, but I agree. I think the first thing I noticed when moving to that generation T100 was the feel. It was extremely soft compared to the previous generation, and my thing that I liked about it was that you could kind of, because my miss is low in the face, I have kind of a little early extension, and that was what I loved about that iron. You could hit it a little low, a groove or two, and still get away with a pretty decent shot, and you didn't see that a lot from that compact of a blade. So I really like that about the T100, and it suited my game well for that last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're seeing just how, I think we talked about this with the TSR drivers, but the way Titleist and their tour staff work, right away, those clubs get put into play. There's not any type of, extended trial period or anything like that. When they take these things to tour, it's amazing how many of those guys and gals go right and put them in the bag immediately. and we saw that with this T100 model, 2023, and we also saw it in the 2021 version as well. So the fact that I think we talked about with the drivers, but when you get that immediate positive response from the best players in the world, you know you're doing something right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was like I said, just an overall that 100. I love the look of it too. I thought just cosmetic wise, it looked a lot better than, to me, AP2. AP2 T100 previous, the 19 one. Those were they're a little busy. This was just a cleaner look, small badging, and I know aesthetics are, especially the back. You don't see it when you play, but I really did like the look of it. Just sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, and I'll also add to it in the testing that we did with the 2021 version, and comparing it to, and comparing it to other models in its category. We always found that I guess in general, in Titleist irons, as a general trend throughout all the categories, they seem to spin a little bit more, which isn't a bad thing by any means. I think when you took so much of this discussion about distance, you kind of think, well, you want low spin for more distance, right? But actually, when it comes to irons, you kind of sometimes want that spin to control the ball a little bit. And Titleist always seems to be sort of, for us anyway, in the testing that we've done, just a little bit higher on the spin scale, which, again, in terms of controlling your golf ball, is usually a good thing. You got to make sure you get that ball in the air and it can stop on the green the way you want it to.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, you can. I think you notice it. I mean, people always talk about in drivers, like, well, the ball looked perfect and then just fell in the sky. Well, you kind of can have that control issue, like you said, when you get too low a spin with some irons. And I know I've been in some fittings and hit some stuff that, the trajectory, everything, it looks great, and then all of a sudden you're hitting some shots that you just don't know why they're not really going as straight as it can. And then you look and all of a sudden you have a spin number that's just extremely low for that specific iron. So T100 is like I said, not shocking it's on the list, but Mike, I'm with you. I thought it was going to be a little higher when we went through this voting. So number 4.
Oh, sorry.
No, go right ahead. No, I want to hear your thought.
I feel like the top 4 and a lot of just irons in golf have tended towards maybe slightly longer blade lengths and starting to get a little bit bigger profile. So I'm glad a nice compact like iron made the list. Yep.
And then we moved to a number 4, which I think is an iron that had just an absolute, especially around the PGA show and all that, just had an absolute ton of buzz. The Mizuno Pro 223. So this year we had the 221, 223, 225. And the 223, I feel like in our forums was the one that everybody was talking about. I mean, the blade's always great, the 221, but that's kind of got a very small, audience in terms of who could really play it. Everybody would love to. I mean, I'd love to put a blade in the bag. I unfortunately don't have the game. But I think the 223 was really interesting because it does fit that broader player from, a tour type, player or a very competitive elite amateur, whatever, up to, a little higher handicap and, but a great feeling iron as usual, and something that they cooked a little performance into it that you don't necessarily see, but they got some tech into that iron. So the Mizuno the Pro 223, what did you guys see in testing, or what do you like about that iron?
Yeah, you alluded to the tech and performance that's sort of implemented in there. I think that was the biggest surprise to me in terms of an iron that is still a player's cavity and still has Mizuno forged feel on it, but then, I mean, right when we initially tested the performance, the distance, the kind of pop that it had, it almost sort of, I mean, it, in a lot of respects, it competes with some players' distance models in terms of that, the smash factor that it generates relative to the loft it might have. So very explosive for this category. It might be the most explosive iron in this category that we really tested as a player's cavity. Still that, compact look. Doesn't, scream like distance or explosiveness when you look at it, but it certainly has a little bit of pop. So it's almost like, I think of kind of the category that's seeming to emerge now as, like the T100S or T150 now, or maybe even you can maybe throw like Callaway Apex Pro in this category where it's a shallow cavity iron, but it has a little bit of pop, a little bit of distance to help golfers that might be confident in their ability to hit the center of the face, but they still want added distance, and I think that's where the 223 is really shining right now.
Right, and I think what's so great about the 223 is it's still grain flow forging, pitching wedge through 8 iron, so you still, you see Mizuno on the face, you're still getting Mizuno, and I think one thing I heard was, I think a lot of people expected to do sort of a 221, 222, 223, 225, some sort of combo set, and the 223 really did a great job, standing up on its own right of through the bag play. I think it's rare that you see a set that's a lot of sets kind of advertise throughout the longer irons, higher launch, and being able to stand on their own. But Mizuno really pulled it off with the 223.
Yeah, and I love too. Like as Mizuno's kind of gone, and I mean they've been making irons forever, but just recently I feel like with like the 900 series and on, they've really done a really good job with making the short irons look more compact. There was a time kind of pre-9 JPX 900 series where you get a 900 pitching wedge look a little big, and I like that they've kept those compact now. The shape looks like it flows well with the set, and just from that cosmetic standpoint, I think a lot of players who weren't playing Mizuno are kind of looking at those now and kind of liking the look, where before they may swap out a pitching wedge for a standard sand wedge model or something like that. And yeah, I like the distance that the 223 has, because I'm that guy. I love looking at a shallow player's cavity, but I need a little help. I need a little distance. I'm not a big hitter. So, being able to kind of get both of those in an iron that feels like a Mizuno is tough to beat. And I know our forum, there was a lot of people talking about them. A lot of people couldn't wait to get their hands on them, to demo them, test them, get fit. So this is an iron that I think a lot of people were really excited for when they first saw the images and all that. They were excited to get these things in shops so they could run in and try them.
Yeah, I also wanted to kind of point out that I think at least for in the discussions we maybe had with customers or even some of the fitters, there was times where, say, the Mizuno Pro 223, or excuse me, like the pass model, let's say it's MP20 or MP18 of shallow cavities, you couldn't quite separate it well enough to the JPX Tour version, right? And so those they overlapped quite a bit. And so in fittings, if someone wants a Mizuno shallow cavity iron, you kind of didn't know which way to go in those two directions. But now I think there's a separation between the two. The 923 Tour and the Mizuno Pro 223, you just a little more pop with that MP 223, a little more distance, a little more performance there, whereas that JPX Tour is kind of more your tour player's iron. That I think the separation there was maybe a little bit warranted, at least for us in the fitting bays. And so really happy to see Mizuno did that, and I think they did it really well.
Yeah, and I think it also separates itself a little bit from the forged as well, because it wasn't quite forged size, it wasn't quite forged, there. Yeah, I think you're right. It fit perfectly kind of in between those two JPX models, which was probably a really good fit, because there are probably some people who look at the forged, it was either a little too big, or for me, it actually kind of launched low, which was interesting. Where the 223, would have been a better fit just from a launch standpoint, because I'm a kind of a shallow ball hitter. So, a great iron. And, as always, I think you'd always expect to see some type of Mizuno on the list, because, they're just kind of loved by our community, especially. And a lot of accomplished players are really, have been Mizuno fans for a long, long time.
Right. I know I played a Mizuno for a long time. I think you played a Mizuno.
I'm a Mizuno man.
Yeah.
Yes.
So restricted to Mizuno performance and the feel. I mean, there's so many classics out there.
Yeah, there are. If you talk to a person, they always have that one favorite iron from Mizuno, from whatever it is from back in the day. So, there's a great iron in the 223, and then kind of I guess I call it our most kind of game improvement iron on the list, really. I guess you can argue between 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, but number 3, the Srixon ZX5, the Mark II ZX5. And I think it's one of those irons that, even though it's crazy popular, I think it's still slightly underrated. I think people either haven't hit it or don't understand how good it is, but it's a little bit bigger overall in size. It's got very little offset, a pretty moderate top line, and it's forgiving, and it goes really far. I mean, it's just over, and then it has, the tour sole. But I really like the ZX5. When I hit it, I was really impressed with just the shape and the look. And then when I finally actually, started hitting some balls, it was really impressive that they packed so much into a great-looking club.
Yeah, I have been fascinated to watch the sort of growth of Srixon iron popularity in the last couple of years now. Getting back to the ZX, 5, 7, ZX4, I guess, from a couple years ago, and now this Mark II series. They have really boomed in popularity, and I think it's not really a crazy secret to the sauce. They just made a really good set of irons, and the ZX5 Mark II is another example, and I think you're absolutely right. Like it checks all the boxes, and in a way, I want to call it a player's distance iron, because that's kind of what it is, but it absolutely is a player's cavity iron too. If you want to play that in your bag, I mean, you can play that. It looks like one. It feels like one. It's not crazy big, compared to other, even the ZX7, and those sets do blend really well together. By the way, and you see a lot of ZX5s in the longer irons. Recent tour winner Lucas Glover, that have that at the top of the set, and then of course, as you mentioned, you can. If you're a mid, even high handicap player, the ZX5s are forgiving enough for you too. So I mean, this is truly an all-purpose iron that Srixon's built, and I think I agree with Mike, or Michael had told me this before too, but we didn't know where Srixon was going to go from that last iron generation.
Yeah,
and the fact that they topped it as much as they did was impressive.
It's really impressive. We reviewed it earlier this year, and I remember looking down at the ZX5. It took me a second to remember which was the ZX5 and which was the ZX7, and I think always the fear with a multi-piece iron is that the word of death of clicky, and we didn't really get that at all. I think the ZX4 at times has a pretty distinct audio, but the ZX5 was really kind of what passed through with flying colors. We got crazy height numbers, and like you said, forgiveness and distance. It really Srixon that they don't pour in the advertising dollars that other companies do, but they just continue to churn out good release after good release.
Yeah, and to me, like I like there's certain irons that kind of fall into I like to call it kind of like the cheater iron, and it's that, and I think the ZX5 is one of those where, like you said, Mike, when you set it down, a ZX7 and a ZX5, you really have to look to see which one is which, because they did such a great job with the aesthetics, the look from a dress, that's the great thing, that a person who doesn't necessarily want to move up to a game improvement or super game improvement iron, just from a visual standpoint, can still get the forgiveness, the distance, the height. They can get the performance they need without having to look at something with a ton of offset or really thick top line. And this is one of those, I think, one of the best, like I said, it's called cheater iron, because it lets you, a guy or a player who may not quite be there yet for a ZX7, lets them still get 90% of the look, but with the performance they need. And it's a great iron. And I think, the minimal kind of badging, they have that little silver, plastic badging in the back, still looks good. It still looks, blade-ish in a way. But I think they did a really good job. And, and the sole on it, especially for guys like us who are kind of in the northern part of the country, it doesn't get rock hard here. And it's got great turf interaction if you play soft conditions.
Right. That Tour BT sole is, I think, something also a lot of golfers are being awakened to with Srixon irons the last few years, and that design and how kind of efficient it is at getting the club in and out of the turf. I think that design is something that it's maybe been hidden in the marketplace for a while, in a sense that not a lot of people knew about it, but now that Srixon irons people are kind of taking notice, I think there's something to be said about that sole design being so clean.
Yeah. And I think the last two generations, between ZX5, 7, 4, moving into the Mark IIs, I think you're now finally getting some of those players who loved the Z745. And that was a kind of like the cult iron, to now move on and say, okay, now I can finally replace those irons after, 6 years, whatever it's been, from those. Because I know there's certain people who they didn't like the longer blade length of the 65, and then the 85 was a little better, but not there. And now I think finally you're getting people who realize, these are really, really good. Probably just as good, if not better, than what the 45 series was, because those were cult classics. I know people were scouring eBay, probably your site, for looking for a backup set, anything like that. Searching Second Swing to see if there's a good a set with some good grooves left that they could stash away for when they wore theirs out. But the Mark II series has just been absolutely phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. And then, even a side discussion a little bit on that too. I don't want to get too big of a tangent, but the ZX4 Mark II is a heck of a lot better looking than the previous ZX4. So Srixon, the entire Mark II line is phenomenal.
I agree. I think they did a great job to be able to like you mentioned, making combo sets, giving fitters the options to, put these combo sets together where someone, hey, they're really comfortable in, 7 through pitching wedge or 6 through pitching wedge, but you know what? When they hit 5 iron or 6 iron or whatever that changes, now we have something that we can move up and add a little speed or add a little height or do something there to keep the set still an iron set, but give them kind of the maximum performance. And they did a great job mixing kind of those 3 irons. And even if you look into the Z Forge 2, if for that really better player, you could blend that into the lower end with the 7s. And that whole line just turned out to be really, really good. They did a great job with the look.
Yeah, I don't know what's next for them, but I'm excited because I don't know how they're going to top
You're excited for Mark III?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, unfortunately, they're a 2-year company, so we're gonna have to wait a little longer. That'll be what?
Right. It's a virtue.
Yeah, 2025 Members Choice. We'll be talking about that one. You guys will be testing for 2025 videos on that. And then we moved into number 2, an iron that I thought was going to be really interesting because the love for the previous gen was absolutely massive. And I was like, man, I hope they don't screw it up because it seemed to be almost perfect. But the Ping i230, and it seemed like the i210 was, again, cult classic, love, ton of play on tour, ton of play in amateur bags. But the 230, it seems people are really loving it right now. What are you guys' thoughts on the i230?
Yeah, I think, well, my initial thought is as someone who still has i210s in the bag currently. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, if you're gonna, replace i210, it better deliver. And I mean, I think they've done a great job of implementing technology in there without completely revamping a design that was so successful for, and there's a reason they didn't replace it for so long. And so I think they've done a really good job. I really appreciate the Micromax grooves technology in the sense that it's not something I can't imagine a lot of players aesthetically are turned off by a couple more grooves visually on the face, but the technology itself is really good at the consistency part of the spin. Various lies, we went out actually when the first iron with Micromax grooves was the I-59. We were out on the golf course testing those out, and we were very surprised by how put the ball in the rough, put the ball in the fairway. That spin was, not fluctuating nearly as much as maybe other models. So I'm glad to see that in the i230, and clearly the people are appreciating that as well.
Absolutely. I think, you hit the nail on the head. I think they've done a great job, keeping that great aesthetic, even though, slightly longer blade length, slightly thicker top line. And I think there's, a significant population that, as gorgeous as they are, the blueprints scare just about everyone on Earth now. And so I think they've done a good job at subtly over the years starting to kind of woo those lower handicap players over to an iron like the i230.
Yeah, and consistency, like you named it, between the grooves, and also, as much as it does have some distance built in, I don't think it's ever going to be thrown in as it's the longest iron in that category. It doesn't have a face that's crazy hot that you sit there and you hit it and go, oh my gosh, I'm a club longer with these. They're very consistent. You may gain a little bit of distance depending on your fit, your previous fitted irons, if they were fit to you or not. But I like the fact that they're not just crazy hot, go forever irons. Like, they do have a lot of control, and you can miss the center a little bit and still get a good amount of that distance back. They're just really consistent irons, and honestly, I've never been a big Ping iron guy. That's just aesthetics kind of turned me away, but they're my backup set. Like, when I bring too many clubs to the course all the time, but I played in a big golf weekend this weekend, and I brought my gamer set and then my i230s for my backup set because they let you get away with some shots you probably shouldn't, but when you hit them dead flush, they're not going to go some crazy distance that you're not expecting. And, they're just overall really consistent, and looks-wise, I really do like them because they do. They have just enough offset where they still look good. The top line, I don't mind it not being razor thin. To me, it gives me a little more confidence that, hey, there's a little bit of mass there. And honestly, the feel and sound when you hit them flush are they're pretty soft and they sound really good, which I know Ping has always kind of been they're not on the Mizuno spectrum, but they tend to be a little firmer, and these are pretty darn soft.
Yeah, and I have a kind of an anecdote from first testing these. So we went down to our Scottsdale store, and one of our fitters there is kind of a mini tour, pro player, and he's always been. You had the previous several years went kind of flip flopping from I-210 to I-59, experimented with the blueprint, but just too small. So he had been very excited when he found out about I-230s, and I mean, we tested them that day. We filmed it on the YouTube if you want to go watch, and he put them in the bag right away, and he still uses them. So I mean, it is really a perfect combination of those things that you're looking for in that kind of shallow player's cavity kind of category. You get Ping's reliable consistency, which I think was kind of the big thing they were going for with this iron, trying to maintain that and maybe even improve on it from I-210. And sure, they aesthetically they made things a little bit longer, maybe larger, but clearly that hasn't turned away that many people.
No, not at all. So yeah, no, just and also, I mean, again, when we spoke turf interaction with the ZX5, I play in Michigan, right around Metro Detroit area, and everything's kind of soft. I mean, the little slightly wider sole, very rounded, going at the leading edge. Turf interaction is really good with those as well. You can play in really wet conditions, and even if you're a steep player, you're still going to get kind of just a mid-sized divot. The club's going to get through the turf really quickly. It's a great feeling iron through the turf as well.
Yeah, it really is fantastic. I know the fitters have said a lot of good things. They were very excited right away. I think in terms of hype or excitement from our fitters, the I-230 release, I mean, was really, really, it was looked forward to, right, by a lot of our fitters, and I think it delivered.
Well, I think you even see it in the voting. I think irons are there's so many options, and you see kind of in the voting numbers 3, 4, and 5. Got around kind of 5 to 6% of the vote, and then suddenly the top two, it's this jump up to 11, 12%. So you see kind of the top tier of irons is really kind of borne itself out in the voting.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, basically, not even 1.5% behind number one was the I-230, and I think, especially even for our audience, that's kind of shocking because that's not an iron that you would think would be, it'd be on the list. It's a great iron, but would it make it to number one? Like, you wouldn't think so, but it came pretty darn close. And yeah, the how close it is to one and how far away it is from three is pretty amazing in terms of percentages.
Mm-hmm.
So that does bring us to number one, which I think a lot of people may not be surprised at. I really wasn't. I was kind of not that shocked, but the Srixon ZX7 Mark II. So the kind of full, we'll call it one-piece forged. I know it's got some tungsten and stuff in it, so it's not truly just one solid billet. But the ZX7, player's cavity, extremely soft, great feeling, but a great performing iron as well. Like I think you said, Drew, just won on tour this weekend. So it was in Lucas Glover's bag. So an iron that's got a ton of play on tour, a ton of play in amateur bags. You see, especially the previous gen, you see it everywhere. But I know our audience loves it. How do you guys like it over there at Second Swing?
Yeah, it's like you said, a ton of play and a ton. I mean, the popularity I mentioned earlier of Srixon irons has been fun to watch since the 21 series, and now in 2023 with Mark II, the Players Iron kind of continues that trend as somehow they topped it, right? And I think to speak on the tour play, I know Lucas Glover is on staff with Srixon, but a remarkable amount of off-staff play as well in the ZX7, ZX5 Mark II kind of combo sets there, whatever it might be. And I mean, it goes to show you make a really good product, and people are going to play it. People are going to test it out against other stuff, and if it's the better product, they're going to play it. And Srixon has definitely delivered in that respect. So, I mean, what else can you say about it, really?
Yeah, we talked about it in the drivers episode of how kind of the PGA Tour's version of the Members Choice is kind of those non-sponsor, those non-staff roles one you choose. That's a huge one. Really, the softness is what jumped out to me, even relative to the ZX5, which as we mentioned, we loved. It was number 3 on our list. And I think of probably any driver of any iron we've hit this year, probably the most consistent spin numbers is what I found. And so, what more could you want?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing too. Because I mean, they don't. I know they have the mill face, but they don't tout any type of real, true hard groove technology in that. And I like the ZX7 because again, it's an iron that you can. It's a little more forgiving than it looks. I mean, you look at it on the rack and you go, man, it's a shallow cavity, all that. But there is some tungsten in it. It does let you get away with some shots that that you don't hit dead flush. You can still get away and hit a pretty decent ball with. And the feel on those shots is still really, really good. For me, I didn't find the ZX7 was quite as good as that thinner shot as the T100, number 5 on the list, but this still wasn't too bad. I mean, I played a lot of the original ZX7 and really liked it. And then as soon as I hit this one, I think I hit it in January in the Dome, unfortunately, at the beginning, but it didn't even matter. Even with those crappy range balls in the Dome, it was still a really great feeling iron, and it put up some great numbers. But the other thing I like about it too is it's not blueprint tiny. Like we've talked about the blueprint a few times. It's a little longer blade length, heel to toe. The top line isn't razor thin, and still better players love it everywhere.
Right, and I mean, especially you talk about a group of players that this can fit into, and it's not quite probably as wide a range as ZX5, but you mentioned it. I mean, it is forgiving enough that if you are in that maybe low to mid handicaps, and you're looking for maybe a combo set, right? The ZX7, ZX5 is a great one where you could have the ZX7 sort of control, soft feel, and that lower part of the set where you want the shorter irons, some control, you're going at pins, and then as you get over into the 7.65 iron, that ZX5 at the top, that was a really popular combo set that our fitters have been throwing into bags for golfers of really a lot of different skill levels all year. So, and yeah, I also wanted to mention too in terms of the spin numbers, right? I know spin in general with Srixon has been a little bit lower now. Their stated lofts are a little bit lower than most irons in their category, but to be a little bit lower but still consistent, I mean that's really good work by them. It doesn't really matter necessarily in a sense how low or high the spin is if it's consistent and the golfer knows what's going to happen with the ball, and if they know what to expect and that's what happens, then your spin can be anywhere in that range as long as it delivers.
A fitter can work with consistency.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, ZX7 wins out, and I want to say Srixon's done very well in Members' Choice previously as well, so it is no shock that they've done extremely well here also. So the ZX7 is, of course, the 2023 Members' Choice champion. And again, like we do with drivers, I want to hear, there's a lot of great irons this year. I mean, you can go from every manufacturer and pick out just an amazing set of irons. To each of you, which, in terms of not making the list, what kind of iron are you are you most shocked with that you didn't see in the top 5?
So I'm not shocked this one didn't make the top 5 just based on the kind of iron it is. And for a lot of people, even talking about this one might be like nails on a chalkboard because of just the aesthetics of it. But so the Stealth HD was one.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly doesn't look like any of the irons we've talked about today.
Same one I had.
But it's like, I think TaylorMade was really innovative with this iron. And they kind of took a risk, I think, with the shape of it, the design of it. And again, if you are a player where aesthetics kind of matter to you, then you can kind of mute the next 30 seconds to a minute and move on. But the performance is there. I mean, it's really consistent, very, very easy to launch in the air. And the fitters have said with players with slower swing speeds, super, super good at getting that ball in the air at the target. And the performance on missed hits is fantastic. So that's one I'll speak to that, again, not really like any of the other ones we've talked about, but I think it was worth throwing in because of how really forgiving and high launching it is.
Yeah, I had actually the exact same answer. I think we might have even talked about it, but just, the results in the bays, we've talked about in the past how certain ping products can be heard all across kind of the store. Sometimes that iron can be seen across the store. But again, you mentioned, I mean, despite, if you can get past the visual, there are some pretty decent numbers under the hood.
Yeah, I was able to hit the Stealth HD before it came out. I happened to be at the Kingdom and got to hit it there, which is, I mean, I know it's kind of a humble brag or whatever, but I was fortunate enough to be there and hit it like right before the embargo date. They showed it off, and I do have to say, like, as much as you're looking at P7MC and all the other P series irons, when you hit that, I think I was just randomly handed a 5 iron, and it was just like, hey, hit a few balls. No warm-up, anything. And I mean, it's just, the ball just went straight, and it went straight in the air, straight, and it just kind of went forever. And yes, visually, it's not a blade. It's not, the most beautiful.
It's not the most.
Yeah, exactly. It's not one of Bobka's blades that's absolutely gorgeous or anything like that, but they do perform, and they go straight in the air and they go long. My snub, I thought, honestly, is the Cobra King Tour. I think that's just a great player's cavity that, again, I think kind of fits in the same mold as all these, that everybody I've heard who's hit it has absolutely loved it. They love the performance. Again, I think it's a slightly spinnier iron, so some people are finding a little bit more control with it. It's not crazy long, but it adds some distance, and it's got that thin top line that a lot of people like. And I think it's just a good combination of, a little bit of forgiveness, a little bit of distance, and a great look and feel. And that was one I was kind of shocked didn't make it on the list, because I've heard a lot of people say a lot of good things about that iron this year.
Yeah, that was definitely one that when we initially tested it and compared it, stood out really well. It's been, in terms of the feel, it's always as comparable, if not even better, in terms of how soft it is. And then you talk about consistency, you talk about launching it high and giving you enough spin for that stopping power. there's no doubts with that iron. And so
Yep.
you do wonder. I mean, it's just another one of those kind of popularity contest type of deals where that Cobra number or that Cobra brand, excuse me, kind of like the Aerojet driver, just lagging a little bit behind there, but it's not like it's anything to do with performance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No points.
Yeah.
No points for 60s.
Yeah, and then again, I think and the other one I'll throw in there, the one that the other one I've been surprised with is Paradigm X, and the reason I said is only because how many I've seen in bags just getting randomly paired up with people out on the course. Like I do go play a lot of golf by myself. I like to go early. It works out for my family life a lot better for me to go early, and I'll go out and play. And I've seen a lot of Paradigm and Paradigm X in bags, and I'll ask people going, "Oh, how do you like those irons?" And everybody, I absolutely love them. Almost everybody I've talked to has been fit for them, and they're just like, man, they're great. I couldn't believe it. They weren't even on my radar, and as soon as I hit them, the fitter and I dialed it in, and they're there. I haven't seen, because usually when you go play, municipal course, you don't see as much brand new equipment in some ways, but these I've seen a lot of, and it's been pretty impressive to see how many new sets of Paradigm and Paradigm X's have been in bags.
Yeah, I agree with that one too. I think the technology that is involved with really the whole paradigm kind of shift, if you will, right, to use Callaway's term. But in their irons especially is really good. I like the way that they kind of structured those, right, where the Paradigm standard model is kind of more of a player's distance iron.
Yep.
And the Paradigm X is that game improvement one. And they've differentiated that versus having kind of in the past, maybe they've done 2 game improvement irons. Now they've kind of differentiated them, and I like that a lot. And the Paradigm X clearly is really doing well, and I've heard all the same sentiments from fitters as well.
Yep.
Yeah. No, really solid. So, again, appreciate the time, guys. Before I let you go, though, of course, we have to. What's in the bag for irons? I know, Drew, you kind of hinted at what's in your bag, but we could still get what's in there and shaft and set makeup. And the same thing for you, Michael, and I'll admit what I'm playing as well.
Yeah, so I've had to do a lot of tinkering. If you've been following the YouTube channel, you might know a little bit about what's sort of in my bag, out of my bag. So I actually did a fitting this spring for a Frankenstein set of TaylorMade irons with Larry. And then I ended up I tried them, didn't quite like them as much as the pink set I have. So I went back to the pink set, and it is a combo of I-210 and I-500, which I got fit for
Wow.
right before the pandemic. And I have had to make some adjustments there because I've sort of gained some ability to swing the club correctly / speed, where those I-500s can be a little juicy. So I've had to weaken the loft and adjust the lie angle a little bit. But as of now, I have Project X LZ 6.5 in the shafts. They're a ½ inch longer with mid-size grips. And I love them. I mean, the short irons especially, I love how consistent they are. And I know when I don't swing well, I know exactly where that ball is going to go still.
Nice.
And then I'm Zuno MP5s, pitching wedge 4-iron, and then an MP25 3-iron with a KBS Tour 120 shaft.
Mizuno purist.
I
gotta say, yeah, the 5s. Those are cult classic as well. I mean, guys love those 5s still.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're beautiful. I played the MP58s back in like 8th and 9th grade with the gigantic pitching wedge that you mentioned earlier. Yeah. Looked like an iron out of the Tiger Woods video game, but no, I love these ones.
I played the MP59s from my freshman or sophomore year of high school up until 2020 when I got fit for these. So Mizuno, a lot of Mizuno play in this group.
That's right. Yeah. So and then this year I actually just made the switch to the new Titleist T150. Well, I do a combo 4 and 5 iron in the 200, 150. 6-through pitching wedge, and then Aerotech steel fiber I-110s. So standard length loft, everything. But I was just fitting to those. It just took them on a big golf weekend. They performed really well. So right now they're in the bag until we try some of the new stuff that's coming out, and we'll see. But right now they're in the bag at the moment. So
I think the T150 I think is going to be a big win for Titleists. Just kind of separating the T100, 100S, and then moving that to T150. I think that's going to be a big win. So not a huge surprise to see that's already in your bag.
I mean, it's as I mentioned, kind of the ZX5 and that cheater kind of moniker. These I think are going to fit into that a little bit as well. So, but hey, so there is our best 2023 GolfWRX Best Irons, Members Choice Best Irons, presented by Second Swing. And this year, Titleist T100, Mizuno Pro 223, Srixon ZX5 Mark II, Ping i230, and then the champion Srixon ZX7 Mark II. So, Drew, Michael, thank you guys again, man. Really appreciate the time. It's awesome to get your guys' insight, knowledge, all that on these irons. We're going to come back. We're going to do a third show, unless they cancel us, but we're doing a third show. We're going to talk some fairways, some hybrids, but irons has been awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. If you want to check out some of the testing videos, definitely check out the Second Swings YouTube. We'll throw a link in the description. But thank you, gentlemen, again, man. Really appreciate the time and all the knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It's been awesome.
Cheers.
Cool.